Hey, Treasure Fan Show pal, Big D and Cobb back here with another movie review. It's been a little while, but we're back and we're going to do a review. And today we're going to review. This is based off of our Star Trek marathon we had a couple weeks ago. So we sat down and watched all the Star Trek movies, and with the exception of Star Trek 1 because we watched that ahead of time.
Yep.
So we did watch them all. It took almost a full 24 hours to complete it. It was, a couple breaks in between for lunch and breakfast and stuff like that. But it did take quite a while to finish it, but we finished it. So we figured today we'd review the first movie we saw, which was Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Movie made in 1982. It's a follow-up sequel to, or 81, follow-up sequel to Star Trek: The Motion Picture. This movie saw a lot of changes from the first movie, specifically uniforms, a few characters, some updated stuff, but some stuff stayed the same. But this is one where after the first movie came out, it did well in the theaters, but not as well as they thought it was going to do, and a lot of it was because of the fact that it's very long and drawn out. So when they went back to the second one, they knew they needed to make it a little more action-oriented, but honestly, Leonard Nimoy didn't want to do it. He was done with the character Spock, and they convinced him to come back with the caveat that, and this is going to be spoilers for this whole thing. This movie's almost 40 years old, so if you haven't seen it at this point, then I don't know what to tell you, but the caveat was Leonard Nimoy came back that he wanted to die. So that's the whole premise of the movie was starting off. And then, of course, they went back and looked through some, Nicholas Myers, who directed the movie, and gone back and looked through a bunch of old episodes. And when he saw the episode Space Seed, he thought that'd be a great idea. They thought it'd be a great idea to bring that character from the original series into more modern era and see what happens to that character, because it's one of the few episodes you watch where at the end you're like, what happened to that character? What happened? So that's basically all it was.
Is the actor from Space Seed the same actor as in the movie?
Yes, it is. It sure is. They actually got Ricardo Montalban back for the movie, which was really great because in between there he had this show called Fantasy Island that became really popular in the 70s. It was a really big hit for a long time. I remember watching the show quite a bit. So they got him to bring him on, which was really good, which was really cool. They didn't really bring anybody else back from that original episode. The woman that played his wife, they didn't bring her back. They'd explained in the movie that she just died. So they wanted to be like everybody back, but they got him. And then they based the whole story around him, which was at the end of Space Seed, Khan and his people were left on this planet to basically rule it. There was no population on the planet, so they could just take the planet over themselves and rule it. But unfortunately, the planet next to their planet a few years later exploded, and it caused the whole planet to kind of go into like a more very unhospitable place. And so they lived there for many years, and of course, over the course of that time, Khan's wife dies, and he becomes very enraged with Captain Kirk because he feels it's Kirk's fault because Kirk never came back to check up on him. And then that puts us into the point we're at now where they're able to capture a Federation starship and go after Kirk, and the whole movie's about Kirk. It's very much like a submarine movie where there's two ships. You don't really know where anybody is because they're in this nebula. They kind of blanks off all their sensors, so they're kind of just going around like they were in submarines under the water. So very cat mouse type of movie. But in all honesty, it is probably majority of Star Trek fans' favorite movie out of all, especially out of the original series movies, is because of the fact it's got so much action. It's got a really good story to it. It's got a lot of heart to it. The death of Spock was a major thing for a lot of Star Trek fans back then. To see a major character in the series, probably the most beloved character of the series, die, which is was very traumatic at the time. There was a finality to it because they at that point after the movie was over with, they talked about that was it. They weren't going to do anymore. So it was a very sad moment, and it's very different than in Into Darkness. Now that we redid this movie, you fast forward 30 some odd years later, and they redid this movie called Star Trek Into Darkness, and they flipped things that time where it was Kirk that died, and how they brought it back was using Khan's blood, whereas in the original movie, Spock died. Khan wasn't even on the same ship. Khan was on another ship. Matter of fact, the funny thing about the movie, I don't even know if you know this, William Shatner, Captain Kirk, never interacted with Khan, ever. They were on view screens, but they never had any actual on-set time together. So they filmed all the stuff on the Enterprise, and then they went later on and filmed the stuff on the Reliant, which was his ship. So they never actually really interact with each other. So people ask William Shatner all the time, what was it like working with Ricardo Montalban? He's like, I didn't really work with him.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw each other a couple of times walking past the set, but we didn't work together because there was no point in the movie where they were ever face to face. So
they should have done that.
Yeah, they should have. And I think they're probably, maybe in a different script they may have met again. It'd be interesting to have them see both meet again, but you didn't really need it. The movie flows along well without it anyway. So it's not my favorite. The Star Trek 3 is actually my favorite, but I do love the movie. I have very fond memories of it. I remember seeing it in theaters. What was I, 9 years old at the time?
Was Generations out?
No, Generations didn't come out until many years later. Many years later. Generations was 1990, I want to say 6. So, and Wrath of Khan came out in 81, 82, so there's quite a few years in between there.
Yeah.
But, just a fun movie with a roller coaster of emotions, a roller coaster of just action and just suspense, and you never know what's really going to happen yet, and the way they do things, I don't know. It really works really well on a lot of levels, and it really is a great movie, And one of the things I think these earlier Star Trek movies have that the movies that are currently coming out now don't have anymore is back in those days it was all practical effects. They actually built the model of the Enterprise. They built the model of the Reliant. They built the model of the space station. Those were all models with little lights in there and all that stuff, and everything lit up.
With Star Wars.
Yeah. So the movie has a much more real feel to it because it's something real on film, whereas like with special effects, I notice a lot of times, especially this newer stuff now, sometimes you can kind of feel, it's not quite right. So it does have a much more, I don't know, I would say it just has much more of a human feel to it than some of the newer stuff that comes out now, where it's just all been computer generated. There's an actual model. Somebody owns that model now. There was a big sale. They had that big auction a few years ago. Somebody owns that Reliant model. The Reliant with the destroyed cell and the Reliant without the destroyed cell. They got the Enterprise model from that movie. Somebody owns those things. They're on display in their house now. So there's actual working models like Deep Space Nine. Those are all working models now.
How much would you pay to get one?
Those things went for a lot of money. They don't do that anymore. The newer series now, it's all computer generated. But this is when they still took the time to. I mean, it's such a big deal. The original Enterprise from the original TV series is actually in the Smithsonian. They just did a series. They just did a thing about 3 years ago where they restored it because it had been sitting there for so long. They had to go back and restore it, and they did this whole thing to restore it. And but the original shooting model that they used for the original series sits in the Smithsonian. It's pretty neat. Got all the lights working, everything like that. Still, it's really, really cool.
Have you been over there to see it?
I went to the Smithsonian. I did. When your dad went on that 8th grade trip, I went with him, and that's one of the places we stopped. And when I went in there, the model was on loan to some other museum. So I walked up, and they had the whole display case. Nothing in the display case. And I sat there and was like, seriously, I'll probably never come here again. And one chance I had to see it, not there. So I did attempt to see it. I just never got a chance to see it. Yeah, it's still a bummer to this day to me. I really do. I really wanted to see that thing, but they still had a little monitor there with like an episode playing. It was kind of funny, and it had all the stuff written down about it. There just wasn't a ship in the glass case. So, but this is, this really is one of those movies that will hold the test of time.
Yeah, you
can watch it now. You show it to people now; they love it just as much as they did when it came out in '82. It's got a lot of heart. It's got a lot of just everything that Star Trek's about is in this movie. So, and even as a kid, for the first time seeing the movie, he was able to spot out the differences from the remake and the original, and how it is differently. You got, by the time in the Wrath of Khan, your Kirk and his crew are very much more seasoned.
Yeah,
they've been around for a long time. They completed their 5-year mission. They saved the world from V'ger in the first movie. But they're all a lot older now. They're in their 50s and stuff like that. They're a lot older. Whereas when you see the Inner Darkness one, they're all still in their prime ages. Yeah. They're in late 20s, early 30s. They're still in the prime. They're not getting there they're close to the retirement years. So it's funny to see those kind of two different diverse type of crews going at this same problem and how they handle those things. Kirk would have never jumped out. I don't think so. Anyways, Kirk would have never jumped out of a ship with the helmet and the thing on and go gliding through the air trying to hit a little porthole on the other end of the ship. I think he would come up with something different than that. But
out of all the Star Trek movies, what would you want to see redone?
redone.
Yeah, like Wrath of Khan.
I think Star Trek 4 would be really cool to see redone with the whales, you know?
Yeah.
I think that'd be really cool to see redone again, you know, because that's a really fun movie, you know, going back in time and them experiencing what we go through right now, but they're from the future, you know, and so
they don't have any money.
When you watch Star Trek, yeah, exactly. When they're all, what does it mean? Exact change in Star Trek 4, because they have no idea. They don't have money in the future, you know. So to them, everything's so much out of place, you know. So that's the difference between those two movies too. Is it's just you got a more seasoned crew versus a crew that's got a little bit of stuff behind their belt, but not nearly as much as the original did.
But after the third movie, Spock just turned into this like this really funny guy.
Yeah, well, that happens. You die, you come back. You know, it kind of happens. You know, so yeah, his character changed quite a bit when he did come back in Star Trek 4. There was a little bit more comedic aspect to it. You know, he was a little more lighthearted. You know, I guess you go through that kind of traumatic experience, you know, you're going to have a different take on things. So. Yeah. But that's it. You have anything else you want to say?
I like the part where he Khan put the bugs in Chekhov. That was like really weird.
Yeah. Then when it came out, it was like 3 times as big as when it went in. Yeah. That freaked me out when I was a kid when I first saw that thing. The little creature came out of the ground. He's like chomping with his pincers, and it was like, no, not going to happen. So. But anything else you want to say? All right, I guess that's it then. We want to thank you guys all for watching. We really appreciate it. We'll be doing some more reviews here pretty soon. Everybody take care and be safe out there. A lot of craziness going on. Yeah. Always keep punting, you know, because you're never going to find. And as always, live long and prosper. Bye.